The city was alive, but he felt invisible. Cars sped past, conversations buzzed in cafes, neon lights flickered across glass towers. Yet inside, there was a hollow stillness that no noise could fill. He had everything that should have made life pleasant: a job that paid well, friends who liked him, a home with comfortable furniture. And still, something was missing. Every morning, he woke up feeling as if life had moved on without him, as if he were a spectator in someone else's story. This is the subtle cruelty most people mistake for life itself. From the outside, it looks like the world is harsh, that events conspire against us. We blame society, bad luck, bosses, or the randomness of existence. But the truth is quieter and far more insidious. The suffering that seems imposed by life often comes from an invisible fracture within us. It is not the world that is cruel. It is the disconnection within ourselves. Like a lamp with no filament, the energy is there, but the spark is missing. Carl Jung once spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. We build walls around our discomforts, our failures, our fears, and then we wonder why life feels so unyielding. Nietzsche would argue that to claim the world is cruel is to abdicate responsibility for one's own inner life, to surrender to an illusion that pain is an external verdict rather than a reflection of inner neglect. Look around. People scroll endlessly on their phones, scrolling past lives more vivid than their own. They binge on content, chasing stimulation, trying to fill the void that cannot be filled externally. They talk, but they do not listen. They work, but they do not feel the purpose in their labor. Every distraction is a symptom of disconnection. Alan Watts called it the illusion of separateness, the trap of believing we are isolated from the universe, from others, and even from our own bodies. When we live in this state, suffering is inevitable. We suffer because we are not present, not because life has singled us out for punishment. And yet, the recognition of this is the first step toward liberation. Imagine, for a moment, that the suffering you feel is not a verdict, but a signal. It is life whispering, urging you to pause, to notice, to reconnect. In the flickering of a street light, the brief glance of a stranger, the hum of the city at night, there are subtle reminders of connection, waiting for us to awaken to them. But most people never see these signs. They are caught in a narrative that says life is cruel, that they are victims of fate, when in reality, the world has no inherent malice, only the consequences of their own disconnection. This is the tension we must confront. The world appears harsh, and we feel the weight of that appearance. But beneath the surface lies a deeper truth. Suffering is not imposed. It is chosen, or at least allowed, through neglect of the self. It is the internal isolation that turns events into torment. The same rain that nourishes a tree feels cold and punishing to the disconnected soul. The same challenges that foster growth in a connected mind feel like crushing blows to one living in a state of inner void. The illusion of cruelty shapes the stories we tell ourselves. Every setback, every failure, every moment of loneliness is interpreted as evidence that life is against us. And because we believe it, the illusion becomes our reality. Yet if we dare to look inward, to face the subtle fracture within, we find a space untouched by judgment, untouched by fear. Jung called this the path to individuation, the reconciliation with all parts of the self. Here, in the quiet recognition of our disconnection, the first thread of liberation appears. It is subtle, almost imperceptible, but it changes everything. The city around him continues to move, indifferent, relentless, beautiful, and chaotic. And he begins to notice it differently. The sound of footsteps is not empty noise, but rhythm. The neon glow is not alienating, but alive with possibility. The faces passing by are not strangers to be ignored, but mirrors reflecting parts of himself. In this pause, in this noticing, he realizes that perhaps life has never been cruel. Perhaps he has merely been disconnected from his own depth, from others, from the pulse of existence itself. Sitting there, the weight begins to shift. It is still heavy, still present, but there is a hint of understanding, a small opening in the wall that once felt impenetrable. This is the moment before the awakening, the cinematic pause before the plunge into truth. It is the moment when confusion lingers, when questions stir, and when the mind begins to sense that the source of suffering may not be external. In that quiet, he asks himself, what if everything he has blamed on life, the unfairness, the cruelty, the pain, is in fact a reflection of his own disconnection? What if the path forward is not to escape life's challenges, but to reconnect, to notice, to feel, to integrate? The thought is unsettling, for it removes the comfort of blame, but it is also liberating. For in the recognition of disconnection lies the first spark of reconnection, the first step toward the life he has been yearning for, unknowingly, all along. Here, at the intersection of illusion and truth, the cinematic story truly begins. The audience is invited to journey not outward, into changing the world, but inward, into rediscovering the depth, meaning, and connection that life has always offered, waiting only for the courage to notice. The subtle fracture that causes suffering extends far beyond personal experience. It is a phenomenon that touches every human being, yet often goes unnoticed. Modern life, with its relentless pace, fragmented attention, and constant stimulation, amplifies this disconnection. We wake up to notifications, check emails before breakfast, scroll through curated lives on social media, and consume information at a pace that leaves no room for reflection. The external world demands so much of us that we lose touch with the inner world that truly sustains us. In this sense, suffering is not inflicted by life. It is cultivated by the way we live within it. Alan Watts often spoke of the illusion of separateness, the mistaken belief that we exist as isolated entities in a universe that is indifferent. This illusion convinces us that fulfillment, connection, and peace must come from outside, from people, achievements, or circumstances. But when we fail to realize that the source of fulfillment lies within, suffering is inevitable. Carl Jung's psychology provides a lens to understand the mechanics of this disconnection. The shadow self, composed of the parts of us we repress, deny, or ignore, grows quietly in the background. Every unacknowledged fear, every suppressed desire, every denied emotion accumulates until it manifests as anxiety, dissatisfaction, or existential unease. Most people do not see this accumulation. They interpret the resulting discomfort as life being cruel, as if the external world is punishing them. Nietzsche, in a similar vein, challenges this perspective, insisting that humans must assume responsibility for their internal world. Life, he argues, is not inherently harsh, but indifferent. Suffering only becomes a prison when we fail to confront the internal chaos and instead project blame outward. Viktor Frankl's insights add a practical and deeply humane dimension to this understanding. In the concentration camps, he observed that those who maintained a sense of meaning and purpose, even in the most horrendous circumstances, suffered less than those who succumbed to despair. Suffering is not eradicated by changing the external world. It is transcended through connection, to a purpose, to others, and to oneself. The modern equivalent is quieter, less dramatic, but no less potent. The sense of emptiness that arises when life is lived on autopilot, without deliberate attention, without alignment to values or passion. The human psyche is wired to seek connection, and when it is denied, we experience what feels like life's cruelty. Consider the everyday scenarios. A person works tirelessly, achieving goals that society applauds, yet feels hollow. A student excels academically, but longs for deeper understanding and genuine relationships. Someone scrolls through endless feeds, comparing themselves to curated images of happiness, feeling failure and envy seep into their bones. These are not failures of circumstance. They are signs of disconnection. The external world provides stimuli and challenges, but it cannot substitute for internal integration. This is where Jung's concept of individuation becomes essential. To suffer less is not to manipulate circumstances, but to harmonize the conscious self with the unconscious, to face the shadow, to accept the complexity within, and to cultivate awareness of one's own desires, fears, and true potential. Cinematic storytelling helps illustrate this idea. Imagine a man walking through a crowded market. Everywhere he looks, people chatter, laugh, interact, but he moves silently, disconnected, as if behind a glass wall. He notices the vibrant colors, the energy, but feels no warmth from it. A woman nearby smiles at someone, a child laughs. The scent of fresh bread drifts through the air, moments that signal life's vitality. But he remains untouched. Why? Not because the world has withheld joy, but because he has closed himself off, living in the belief that life is cruel and indifferent. Philosophically, this is where the human condition intersects with choice. We can either accept the narrative imposed by disconnection or confront it. Watts would argue that the mind's obsession with control and separation keeps us from experiencing the fluidity of existence. We resist the present moment, cling to identity, and label experience as suffering when it does not conform to expectation. Nietzsche reminds us that freedom is found not in external circumstances, but in our response to them, through the embrace of life as it is, not as we wish it to be. Frankl provides the guiding principle: find purpose, and suffering transforms. The interplay between disconnection and perception is subtle but profound. Life presents events neutrally. The meaning and weight we assign to them come from our inner state. A harsh word from a friend, a setback at work, a moment of loneliness. These do not inherently cause suffering. It is the fracture within, the absence of self-awareness, the unintegrated shadow, and the neglect of purpose that converts neutral events into emotional torment. Understanding this distinction is transformative. To reconnect, we must first notice. Awareness is the doorway. When we pause to observe the mind's patterns, the habitual responses, the stories we tell ourselves, we begin to dismantle the illusion. We see the tendency to blame life, to externalize suffering, to ignore the internal void. By facing the shadow, by reflecting on desires and fears without judgment, by cultivating presence, we start to heal the internal fracture. The world does not need to change. Our perception and connection to it do. Small practices illuminate this path. Mindful attention, journaling, reflective solitude, deep conversation, creative expression. These are tools of reconnection. They cultivate a sense of integration, allowing individuals to inhabit life fully rather than react to it. Each practice is a thread weaving the fragmented self back together. In cinematic terms, these moments are subtle. A man watches sunlight filtering through leaves. A woman listens fully to a friend's story. A child reaches for a book and finds wonder. Each act of attention reconnects the inner and outer world. By the end of this exploration, the audience understands that suffering is a signal rather than a sentence. It is a message that something within has been neglected, a call to align inner life with outer experience. Jung's shadow, Nietzsche's personal responsibility, Watt's recognition of flow, and Frankl's search for meaning converge. The path out of suffering is inward. Life is not cruel, disconnection is. The narrative of cruelty dissolves when the fracture is addressed, and the individual begins the subtle, profound work of reintegration. The moment of transformation begins quietly, almost imperceptibly. It starts not with grand gestures or dramatic events, but with a single act of noticing. He pauses on a city street, feeling the rhythm of movement around him, the rise and fall of voices, the warmth of sunlight bouncing off glass facades. He realizes that the world has not changed. He has. The disconnection that once made life feel cruel begins to soften as attention shifts inward and outward simultaneously. This is the first step of integration, recognizing that suffering does not come from life itself, but from the fractured relationship with oneself and with the world. Psychologically, this is where the work of reconnection begins. The individual must confront the shadow, the unacknowledged fears, suppressed desires, and rejected emotions that have silently dictated experience. It is a courageous act, for the shadow often carries shame and discomfort. Jung emphasized that the shadow is not to be eliminated, but integrated. By acknowledging and embracing these hidden parts of ourselves, we reclaim the energy that was trapped in avoidance. In cinematic terms, imagine the protagonist standing before a mirror, hesitant at first, seeing fragments of himself he had long denied. Anger, envy, longing, and fear. As he names them, feels them, and allows them to exist without judgment, a subtle shift occurs. A weight lifts, a previously invisible light flickers to life. Meanwhile, practical reconnection with the external world begins. Viktor Frankl's lessons on purpose provide a guide. Suffering is mitigated when life has meaning. Purpose does not need to be monumental. It can be found in simple acts of care, creativity, or intentional presence. The protagonist begins small, helping a colleague, listening to a friend without distraction, tending to a plant, immersing in music or art that evokes deep feeling. Each act of engagement is a stitch in the fabric of connection, knitting together internal and external experience. He discovers that the more fully he participates in life, the less the illusion of cruelty persists. The cinematic rhythm of this transformation is deliberate. Short, sharp sentences punctuate long stretches of reflective silence. Scenes shift from frenetic urban chaos to intimate moments of clarity. A crowded cafe transforms from a backdrop of sensory overload to a theater of human connection. A brief touch on the shoulder, a shared smile, the quiet focus on a task becomes profoundly meaningful. These moments illustrate the principle that connection is cultivated, not discovered accidentally. Life's richness is always present. It only requires attentiveness to access. Alan Watts' perspective illuminates another dimension. The mind's obsession with control and separation amplifies disconnection. The protagonist experiments with surrender, allowing events to unfold without constant judgment or interference. In doing so, he experiences flow, the sense of effortless alignment with life. It is in these moments that he recognizes how much suffering was self-imposed, generated by attempts to dominate reality rather than participate in it. The world does not punish, it merely is. Resistance had amplified the pain. Acceptance, not resignation, becomes the vehicle for transformation. Storytelling, in this section, emphasizes contrast. The same city that once felt cold and indifferent now pulses with opportunity, warmth, and vitality. Rain no longer feels like punishment, but like life moving through him, nourishing rather than battering. Challenges that once appeared insurmountable are now seen as invitations to engage, to act, and to grow. The narrative tension, the illusion of cruelty, is resolved not by changing the world, but by recalibrating perception, deepening awareness, and reconnecting the self. The protagonist's inner life becomes increasingly vivid. Journaling, meditation, reflective solitude, and meaningful dialogue serve as tools of integration. Each day includes deliberate moments of attention, noticing sensations in the body, acknowledging emotional currents, observing thoughts without judgment. These practices cultivate self-awareness, which is the foundation of true connection. By being fully present with himself, he becomes fully present with others. Silence, once empty and frightening, now carries meaning and peace. Emotionally, the transformation unfolds in waves. There is discomfort as long-held patterns are challenged, but these are interspersed with moments of profound insight and relief. The cinematic rhythm mirrors this experience. Long pauses, subtle shifts in light and color, close-ups on fleeting expressions of realization, intertwined with narrative voiceover that reflects internal understanding. The audience experiences the ebb and flow of change, feeling both tension and release as the protagonist moves from disconnection to integration. By the midpoint of this section, a key insight crystallizes. Suffering is not something to escape, but a signal to guide reconnection. The protagonist sees that previous attempts to avoid discomfort through distraction, denial, or external blame only deepen the isolation. Now, by embracing awareness, responsibility, and presence, he transforms suffering into insight, emptiness into fullness, and isolation into relational and existential integration. Cinematic imagery reinforces this psychological shift. Sunlight breaking through clouds, reflections in water, children playing in the streets, conversations with laughter and honesty. These external symbols echo the internal integration taking place. The protagonist begins to move through the world differently. Slower, more attentive, more receptive, noticing textures, sounds, and emotional cues previously ignored. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to practice presence, empathy, and connection. Finally, the section crescendos into a moment of quiet revelation. He sits alone, yet he is not lonely. The city moves around him, vibrant and chaotic, yet he feels a deep sense of belonging. The inner fracture that once distorted perception has been addressed through attention, reflection, and purposeful engagement. Suffering has not disappeared entirely, it never can, but it no longer dominates. It has been transmuted into a compass, pointing toward life lived fully and consciously. The emotional arc concludes with a pause that is cinematic in its stillness. The audience witnesses the protagonist fully present, integrated, and aware, of being no longer at the mercy of the illusion that life is cruel, but empowered by the realization that reconnection is always possible. The subtle, transformative power of presence, awareness, and purpose is made palpable, leaving the viewer poised for the final section, living this newfound understanding in daily life. The city that once felt cold, harsh, and overwhelming now hums with subtle life. He walks the same streets, yet everything appears profoundly different. The neon lights that once seemed alien now shimmer with warmth and possibility. The crowd that once made him feel invisible now moves like a living rhythm he can join rather than resist. Each sound, glance, and movement resonates with connection. He realizes he is not separate from life. He is an integral part of it. Living connected means seeing beyond the surface, understanding that life itself is not cruel, and recognizing that the sense of suffering arises from disconnection, not reality. Everyday choices become opportunities for integration. Small, intentional acts, pausing to greet a neighbor, listening deeply in conversation, helping a colleague without expectation, become powerful tools for reconnection. Viktor Frankl's wisdom illuminates this path. Suffering diminishes when life is imbued with purpose and meaning. Purpose does not need to be monumental. It can be found in creative expression, nurturing relationships, and mindful presence. The more he engages intentionally, the less life feels harsh. Connection is not accidental. It is cultivated through awareness, attention, and courage. Each deliberate choice reinforces the truth that life's richness is always present. It only requires recognition and engagement. Philosophical insight blends seamlessly with practical action. Jung's shadow is acknowledged, fears and insecurities are accepted, and internal complexity is embraced. Nietzsche's insistence on personal responsibility guides his decisions. Life is not a series of punishments, but a landscape shaped by how he chooses to inhabit his inner world. Alan Watts' reminder of the illusion of separateness informs his interactions. He no longer reacts automatically, but moves with awareness and presence, participating fully in the flow of life. These philosophical principles are embodied through everyday choices, gestures, and attention. The transformation is reflected in the world around him. Morning sunlight illuminates textures, patterns, and details he had previously ignored. Conversations with friends become rich, meaningful exchanges. Walking through a park, he notices the vibrancy of nature, the wind rustling leaves, shadows dancing, and small creatures moving through life. Each observation echoes his inner transformation, reinforcing the alignment between inner life and outer reality. Life is not harsh. It is alive, responsive, and abundant for those willing to perceive it. Reflection deepens this awareness. Past suffering is no longer a source of resentment. Instead, it becomes guidance, showing him where disconnection existed. Solitude transforms from isolation into sanctuary. Silence carries clarity, and interactions with others gain depth and meaning. Life becomes a continuous lesson in awareness, presence, and connection. Practical application solidifies this transformation. He listens more attentively, engages with purpose, and observes discomfort without reacting. Small acts of mindfulness and intentionality accumulate, creating a rhythm of living that integrates insight into daily life. Transformation is revealed not as a single event, but as an ongoing process, a dynamic interplay between conscious awareness and the ever-changing flow of experience. Emotionally, the effect is profound. He experiences solitude without fear, silence without emptiness, and daily interactions with richness previously unperceived. Cinematically, ordinary moments, sunlight filtering through leaves, shared laughter, the aroma of food prepared with care, become imbued with significance. Connection, attention, and presence emerge as the antidotes to the illusion of cruelty. The ultimate insight crystallizes with clarity. Life is never cruel. Disconnection is. Challenges, setbacks, and moments of discomfort are not punishments, but opportunities for learning, growth, and reconnection. Suffering becomes a guide, isolation a teacher. Life is not a battlefield to endure, but a living canvas to engage with fully. The city breathes around him, and he breathes with it, fully present, fully alive, fully engaged. Every moment of perceived emptiness or hardship is an invitation to reconnect, integrate, and awaken to the depth, meaning, and beauty that has always existed, quietly awaiting recognition.